Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm taking you to the Ultra League, where a Pokemon that has not been available in the game for many years just received a buff, and that is Armored Mewtwo. These battles were submitted to the channel by a member of the community Roll in the Heat, so many thanks for the battle submission. Now, Armored Mewtwo is fast with Confusion got extra energy generation. Now, this causes Mewtwo to perform a lot better neutrally than it used to, and pick up some interesting matchups like being able to defeat Corviknight in the 2-shield, despite Corviknight resisting Confusion. So without further ado, let's hop onto the matches, and let's take a look at Armored Mewtwo with its newly buffed Confusion in the Ultra League. Hopping into the first match, picking up a bit of a tricky lead, Shadow Steelix into Corviknight. Corviknight, even though it's taking super effective damage from the Thunder Fangs, is a complete wall to the charge moves from the Steelix. So the best Steelix can hope for here is to just soft lose the zeros and try and go for farm on either the Armored Mewtwo or the really spicy third Pokemon, which is Shadow Lugia. Shadow Lugia doesn't see a lot of Ultra League play, but is going to add some pretty fun spice to this team overall. Payback lands, picking up the knockout, and now it's time. In comes Shadow Lugia. Opponent is not going to get a payback. This is only enough for an Air Cutter. An Air Cutter does such little damage in the Ultra League that the Lugia basically gets a free fly in exchange for taking no damage. Out comes Regidrago. It's a shiny Regidrago at that. Lugia farms up to the Aeroblast. The fly bait is going to grab the shield. Regidrago continues to overfarm, and that lets Lugia get to a second fly. That fly is going to be shielded, now down 2 shields. In comes Armored Mewtwo. Mewtwo more than happy to absorb a Dragon Energy. Dragon Energy will do quite a lot of damage. The opponent throws once again, and you have to shield something, so the shield will come out. Out comes Cresselia, and this is not great news for the Armored Mewtwo. Armored Mewtwo is fully walled by this Cresselia. Cresselia will go for the Moonblast. Armored Mewtwo, over farming, trying to get out of the matchup, is able to escape, and back in comes the Lugia. Shield comes up. Lugia just needs to get to this Aeroblast. Aeroblast will be inflicting devastating damage. Lugia able to get the Aeroblast. Switch Claw does not come up for the opponent, and this Aeroblast is going to hurt. Aeroblast lands, big damage onto the Cresselia. Cresselia is going to return fire with the Moonblast. Moonblast is going to put the Lugia into farm down range for the Regidrago. The question is, how close is Regidrago to the Dragon Energy? Psystrike does not knock out. Can they get there? They cannot, and that's going to be a win. The bulk of Armored Mewtwo paying off in game number 1 as Psystrike KOs Cresselia, and that's a good game. He actually gets same leads as game number 1 and game number 2. Shadow Steelix versus Corviknight once again. Corviknight, we know it's absolutely everywhere in the Ultra League, and for good reason. It has incredible bulk, and its typing has just a truly insane amount of defensive resistances. Corviknight goes for the payback once again. Steelix looks pretty comfortable to play it out the exact same way. Another Psychic Fangs into the Corviknight, another no shield, and as before, the opponent will be able to win the zero shield. Now, depending on IVs, it'll be interesting to see if Lugia is able to get the full fly. Oh, an adjustment in strategy. Out comes Armored Mewtwo to get the Confusion farm down. Armored Mewtwo up quite a bit of energy. It's going to be a Belly Bolt in the back, and this could be a very tricky game to win. Belly Bolt very strong into both of these remaining 2 Psychic types. The Belly Bolt, bit of an interesting play on their part. They're not going for the Parabolic Charge. Instead, they're over farming, and they're losing so much HP to do so. Opponent throws on alignment. There's the Zap Cannon that picks up the knockout, and in comes Lugia. Lugia going to have a bit of a tough time here, as the opponent will now look to go for these Parabolic Charges. Typically, Belly Bolt just goes for the Parabolic Charge right away. Opponent opting for a Zap Cannon that did pick up the knockout onto that Armored Mewtwo, but they lost a ton of health in the process. It's a Giratina in the back. Giratina, it is not the Shadow Giratina, it is the shiny Giratina. Giratina, Ancient Power, no boost comes through. This is a really tough bait call. Building up to the Aeroblast, baiting with the fly, getting the shield. Lugia needs the Aeroblast if it's going to win, but the opponent is able to outpace. Will Ancient Power be enough? It will not. Lugia hangs on and gets to the Aeroblast. It's a Shadow Aeroblast. It's an incredibly efficient move, taking out the Giratina and securing the win. Dream lead in the next match. Steelix into a Thundershock Belly Bolt. The Belly Bolt is staying in this matchup to start with, and they're actually going to throw energy. So they must be really core broken if they're staying in. They go for the Zap Cannon. There's the pivot out into Corviknight. And despite the incredibly favorable lead, this is where things will get a little bit murky. because Corviknight and the Belly Bolt are very strong into the backline. So Steelix will honestly get overloaded here. Steelix just is too much that it needs to do. Steelix able to get a bunch of debuffs off onto the Corviknight, but Payback would inflict some pretty severe damage. And if you're Steelix, being able to preserve health on that Steelix to tank moves from the Belly Bolt will be extremely important. Out comes the Armored Mewtwo getting hit with the Payback. Belly Bolt re-hits the field, and Belly Bolt, this time, just going for the Parabolic Charge as soon as they get it. Parabolic Charge is going to land. Even with the defense boost, Psystrike will still do a solid amount of damage. Psystrike is going to connect. Belly Bolt will not be able to get the farm down. Belly Bolt tries for it, but they are not going to get there. Psystrike is reached. Down goes Belly Bolt, and in the back is Kyurem. Kyurem, one of the deadliest Pokemon, as it has incredible speed to spam out Glaciates, and for a nuke move, Draco Meteor hits everything for big damage. Now the Kyurem has been debuffed by Psychic Fangs. Out comes Lugia. Lugia no shields, Glaciate hits for big damage. Getting to the fly, Kyurem has to shield everything because the Kyurem is the only Pokemon that has a decent amount of health remaining. But the speed on this Kyurem is going to be a really big issue. Already at another Glaciate, Lugia has to try and get to the fly. Lugia does get to the fly just barely, by the narrowest of margins, outpacing Kyurem, taking the knockout. In comes Corviknight, met with the Steelix, and the opponent will resign the match. Picking up a positive lead in the next match, Steelix into Empoleon. Opponent safe switches into Togekiss, and if Togekiss is running the standard Psyshock plus Aura Sphere moveset, they're about to be completely walled by Armored Mewtwo. Armored Mewtwo gets the catch on the Aura Sphere, and now it's up to the opponent to prove that they actually have Dazzling Gleam. Even if they have Dazzling Gleam, it will not be enough to knock out here. Armored Mewtwo is going to no-shield. They do have Dazzling Gleam, so at the very least, they have something they can throw here, but it's not going to be enough as Armored Mewtwo gets the full confusion down. Out comes Zygarde. Zygarde going to be immediately struck with the Psystrike. Armored Mewtwo farming up very close to 2 more Psystrikes. The damage output from this Armored Mewtwo really adding up. There's a switch into Empoleon. Empoleon does not get the farm down. Mewtwo gets Dynamic Punch, and that Armored Mewtwo was an absolute wrecking ball in that game. One Hydro Cannon will not be enough to pick up the knockout, but preserving health on Steelix could be very, very valuable. So Steelix will at least invest 1 shield and immediately fire off the Psychic Fangs. No shield from the opponent, as they know Psychic Fangs not going to threaten a knockout. Hydro Cannon lands, Steelix barely hangs on, and Zygarde will swiftly be answered with Shadow Lugia. Shadow Lugia is going to be hit with a Bulldoze, opponent fishing for debuffs that they do not get. I assume they're on Bulldoze Outrage then, so the Outrage should be coming through momentarily. No, it's actually a Crunch. So they are running very, very low damage moves. In comes Empoleon, Lugia going for the flex. Shadow Aeroblast does get shielded, but the boost. Aeroblast has a boost and the catch as well. Oh my goodness, what a devastating endgame for the opponent. In comes Lugia. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We've got some spice in the next match, leading a Steelix into Chestnut. The safe switch into Armored Mewtwo answered with Corviknight, and this is a matchup I talked about at the beginning of the video. Armored Mewtwo, if it wants to, does have the ability to cleanly win the 2-shield. Armored Mewtwo thinking about it, but decides against it, instead gonna no-shield, and Payback is gonna land, dealing some pretty significant damage. Another Psystrike comes out from the Mewtwo. Psystrike is going to connect. Mewtwo farms up. There's a switch out into the Steelix to absorb energy. Payback not going to be a big problem for Steelix. Opponent does not send back in the Chestnut, but instead out comes Talonflame. And this poor Chestnut is about to have a truly terrible time against the double Psychic types that are in the back. Talonflame looks for a farm down, but it cannot get there. Another Psychic Fangs is reached. The Talonflame does exit with 100 energy, but they are very heavily debuffed. In comes Armored Mewtwo. Mewtwo immediately met with a move from the Talonflame. No shields, it's the Fly. Fly does pick up the KO, and now the opponent does have the ability to threaten a Brave Bird. The shield comes out, opponent just gonna go for the Fly. In comes Chestnut, but what is this Chestnut gonna do against the Shadow Lugia? The answer is absolutely nothing. Fly connects, picking up the 1-hit KO. All they have left is a very low health Corviknight and just a little bit of Talonflame, so they will resign the match. Hopping into the next match, picking up a pretty nice lead and a pretty nice counter swap for Steelix. The Steelix leads into the Togekiss and then is met with a Jellicent safe swap. Jellicent would be a nightmare for this backline to deal with, so catching it on the safe swap is honestly really nice. Jellicent will connect with the Surf, that hits for quite a bit of damage. Opponent tries to go for the CMP type, but Steelix will not fall for it. Can Steelix potentially get the full Thunder Fang down here? It's going to be close. Steelix commits and does get that full farm down. Opponent chooses to bring back in the Togekiss. That does limit Steelix to going for Psychic Fangs, but the Togekiss is going to lose a lot of ground. They're now going to be 2 stages debuffed, and there's always the potential to try and catch a Dynamic Punch. No catch attempt comes through the opponent, just through instantly, and Togekiss will finally KO the Steelix. Out comes Armored Mewtwo. It's a Venusaur in the back. Oh no, Venusaur did get buffed this season. It got access to Sludge, a new bait move, but unfortunately Venusaur, it's not going to be able to do much into this double Psychic backline. Mewtwo's Psystrike would easily knock out the Venusaur. Venusaur puts up the shield. Venusaur going to get the final shield from the Mewtwo with a Sludge bait. Can Mewtwo get a farm down? No. Gonna send in the Lugia. Lugia answered with the Togekiss, but it's just too little too late. The Togekiss would have to have Dazzling Gleam if it wanted to do any damage, and even if it does have Dazzling Gleam, that just simply will not be enough to pick up the knockout. Togekiss, they throw a Psyshock. Oh no, they are completely walled by this Shadow Lugia. Lugia, no shield, Psyshock number 2, and this game is over. Lugia now just shy of the back-to-back flies. Fly easily going to be knocking out that Togekiss, and now a quick switch into the Armored Mewtwo. Mewtwo is definitely the star of the show, so let's let Mewtwo take that final knockout to secure the win. Shadow Steelix into Florges in the next match. Florges can obviously keep pace in this matchup with Chilling Water. Opponent ends up switching out into Guzzlord. Guzzlord is a very uncomfortable Pokemon for this team to see. Guzzlord will be spamming out Brutal Swings, and they spam out these Brutal Swings very quickly. It's every 9 turns to the Brutal Swing, so it is incredibly fast. Earthquake lands, out comes Lugia. Lugia, at the very least, there's been a lot of damage done to the Guzzlord, but these Brutal Swings will definitely add up. Brutal Swing is going to connect. It looks like Lugia can survive 2 Brutal Swings, but not by much. Second Brutal Swing lands. Lugia would love a farm down, gets the farm down, exiting with an Aeroblast loaded is quite nice. In comes Florges. No baits from the Lugia, full sending Aeroblast, but unfortunately it's sent into the shield. Florges gets a full farm down, and things could get a little bit tricky. In comes Steelix. Steelix will be taking some pretty significant damage from the Chilling Water. Opponent opting for a Trailblaze, an interesting play. So they may be on Trailblaze plus Chilling Water. They're going for the Trailblaze again. They are just ramping up their attack more and more. In comes Mewtwo. Mewtwo going to be absorbing this double boosted move. It is going to be a Trailblaze from the Florges once again. The opponent switches out of their triple boosted Florges, which I think is a pretty big misplay, and now they send out Empoleon. Empoleon's Hydro Cannon will fail to take a knockout, but they already have another Hydro Cannon locked and loaded. This is going to force the final shield from the Mewtwo. Mewtwo able to reach the back-to-back Dynamic Punches. Only 1 shield for the opponent. They decide to let it go. In comes Steelix, and Steelix is able to snipe down with Thunder Fangs. Back in comes the Florges. Florges was honestly terrifying at +3 attack. The decision for the opponent to switch out honestly feels like it was their downfall. It looks like the opponent has just stopped tapping as they have conceded the match, and Steelix will get to fully farm down and secure the win. Hopping into the final match, Shadow Steelix into Talonflame. This is a matchup where Steelix does a pretty nice job of keeping up. Steelix able to debuff with Psychic Fangs in case the opponent is able to ramp up their attack with Flame Charge. Opponent undertaps there, so they do end up giving an entire free Thunder Fang to the Steelix, and they are on Flame Charge. That makes sense. Quick switch into the Armored Mewtwo. Mewtwo going to be answered with Blastoise, the battle of the bulk. Armored Mewtwo versus Blastoise, both these Pokemon known to be exceedingly tanky. Mewtwo connects with the Psystrike. Very nice charge attack timing from the Blastoise. Blastoise goes for the Skull Bash. That is going to use almost all of its energy, and with its buff defense, can it now survive a Psystrike? It's going to be close. Mewtwo goes for the Psystrike. That lands. Blastoise does not make it, and back in comes the Talonflame. Talonflame did have a charge attack loaded, and they throw it here, boosting up their attack with the Flame Charge. In comes Lugia. It's Galarian Weezing in the back, and this is going to be a very tricky game to win, as unfortunately the Lugia has such limited fast move pressure against this Pokemon. Lugia farms up a ton of energy, but what is this Weezing's moveset? Weezing goes for the Brutal Swing. Oh, that's not good. They can hit for super effective damage. The Fairy Winds don't do much, but Weezing has such a pacing advantage. Weezing, no shields, in comes the Steelix. Do they have Overheat? Steelix puts up the shield. It's going to be just a Brutal Swing. In comes Talonflame. Talonflame immediately answered with the Psychic Fangs. Talonflame shields, that's going to be a misplay as they're going to get fully farmed down. A critical error from the opponent. Back in comes the Weezing. Weezing needs a move bigger than a Brutal Swing to take the knockout. It appears their Brutal Swing Sludge and a second Brutal Swing will win charge attack priority. So Brutal Swing takes the knockout. Back in comes the Lugia. Lugia has to survive a Brutal Swing and 2 Fairy Winds to take home this win. Brutal Swing is going to connect. Lugia is able to hang on. I wasn't quite sure, but Lugia survives, getting to the fly and securing the win. All in all, big thank you to this trainer for sending in this footage, and I do think that Armored Mewtwo is now a pretty viable Ultra League Pokemon. It boasts some pretty impressive wins, like against Florges, which is an absolute meta terror, being able to take home wins in the 1s and 2 shield, and being able to take home a 2 shield win against a payback user in Corviknight. I think Armored Mewtwo is very legit. I don't think it's a must-have Pokemon by any means. I think that's one of the nice things about the Ultra League meta is there's quite a lot of different Pokemon that are viable. So even if you don't have this Pokemon that was only available, I believe back in 2021, I'm pulling up my own app now. It looks like mine was from 2020 and 2019. So I stand corrected, 2019 and 2020. So it's like a 5-year-old Pokemon at this point. So even if you don't have it, it's not a must-have Pokemon by any means. But I do think it is definitely improved, and getting that little bit of extra energy generation does go pretty far when it comes to trying to race Pokemon to charge moves. So I do really like Armored Mewtwo this season. I think it's a very solid pick, and I think it's just a really good kind of base that you can pair a lot of cores around, just because it has a ton of bulk. And with Confusion and Psystrike, if you end up in those matchups where there's not a Confusion resistance, it can just feel very overwhelming neutrally. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.